Hello. All right. Well, thank you all for having me here today. I was asked to come in and just give at least a few thoughts on how a program like CPRIT, in this case, hopefully for Neuro, but how a program like CPRIT can help drive commercialization, and particularly how can it help drive commercialization here in Texas, because I think that is what we're doing with our taxpayer dollars when we support a program like this, right? And I sat down and I was thinking about, what could that story look like? And I actually realized that I've been in Texas since 2010, and CPRIT has been a presence in my life and a sort of keystone of my own trajectory throughout that whole time. And so I originally came down here to get my training at Baylor College of Medicine, and during that PhD, I was luckily supported by a training award that a faculty member had applied to CPRIT for, and that was able to offset some of my stipend. I then subsequently left Baylor, worked with Mercury Fund to launch a company called Courier. We did not get CPRIT funding, but nobody's ever perfect all the time. There's no perfect system out there in the world. But we did end up selling that company. And then about the time that we sold that company, I went over to TMC Innovation to help launch this crazy idea, this new CPRIT-supported accelerator. They had done accelerators for a number of years, primarily in digital health and med tech, and those were typically more mature companies, and that's not what we're working with typically here on the biotech side. And how can we take some of those lessons learned, the infrastructure that TMC can bring to bear, and the lessons learned from startups, and launch a new program to find really cool innovation that had been being funded now for a number of years, both by the NCI and by CPRIT. You heard several $1 billion, I think, at that point, and help drive those out of the academic institutions and into companies. And it was through that I met Drs. Max Momokin and then Malcolm Brenner. And we were able to go from myself and two brilliant scientists and some really cool clinical data that I'll share with you really briefly out, and now we have an incredible company that we're driving forward. We're about to launch our phase 2 trial, and as Kristen mentioned, we did get a CPRIT award. We're about a year in. It was a $13.4 million award. I never forget. Exactly how much it was. And not that anybody's counting, but I think we were also the best score for our cycle, but So March Bio. So what are we doing here? And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on exactly what our product is, but I do think it's worth talking about it to contextualize both the impact the products that are being generated here in Texas can have, as well as to talk about why sometimes this isn't enough to get us all the way over the line, and why we need these additional tools. So T-cell lymphoma is a smaller subset of the larger lymphoma and leukemia patient populations. But unfortunately, your B-cell malignancies, that's the majority of your lymphomas and leukemias, they have a number of therapies available for them, everything from chemo to transplants, targeted therapies, immunotherapies, and now these things that we call cellular therapies. And that's where you take your immune cells out of your body, you engineer them, supercharge them against specific targets, and then you reinfuse them, and you can harness your own immune system with a little bit of engineering and drive curative, durable responses. We have patients now that have received cell therapies as children who've gone to college and are living their entire lives when otherwise they would have unfortunately succumbed to these very serious diseases. But this is not the case for these T-cell lymphoma patients. Even in 2024, the patients at diagnosis have about 30 to 60% optimistically overall survival at 5 years. And once they become relapsed or refractory, and unfortunately the very vast majority will, that drops to 10 to 20% survival over just 3 years. And so our CAR T-cell therapy that was developed by Max is able to target a target called CD5 and overcome some of the challenges that have held back the development and application of this powerful technology. I'm not going to get into that science, but what I am going to point out to you is a scan on the left here where you can see a patient who had a very heavy tumor burden and was able to achieve a complete remission just 4 weeks later. This trial's been ongoing at Baylor College of Medicine. 2 of the 4 patients that achieved a complete response are still alive now 5 years later. And then there's been improvements in the manufacturing. So the initial response rates. We're already beating standard of care, is about a 44% response rate. There's some improvements in manufacturing where it looks like we're clocking about a 60% complete response rate right now. And that's what we're taking forward into that phase 2 trial. So we're really excited because that would be a order of magnitude better than anything that's available to these patients today. And so it should be obvious, right? Clinical data, everybody says, go get clinical data. And then people will see that this is a compelling story, and they'll throw money at you, or Novartis will come buy your technology and you'll be done. And you know, especially if you have a high patient need. But the truth is that's not everything you need to do, because there's still so much work that has to get done between that early academic data to approval. And then you have to navigate that, and you have to be able to tell that story. You have to convince people to put a pretty substantial amount of money forward to help drive that development and make them believe that you can get it all the way over the finish line. And so obviously the other sort of point to my favor, and I think really a true testament to my leadership, is we started March Bio during the worst biotech downturn in a decade. So timing is everything, and my timing of the market is poor, so you should use that as an indicator of where not to put your stock money in the future. But you know, we felt like we had a really compelling story, and we could put together the resources here in Texas. And so we forged ahead anyway. Just to sort of reemphasize that point, cell therapy is that third bar down, and you can see it's dwarfed by the investments into your more traditional drug classes, which are your small molecules and your biologics. And so certainly, whatever we did, if we believed in this product and we wanted to be successful, we had to be really strategic about how we were going to put the company together and how we were going to get those resources to help us drive forward. And so how to overcome what I should have put as nearly insurmountable odds, right? And so I call it sort of the startup boot sequence. The first step is you have to figure out what is the but-for question. Why has this therapy, where we could see already that there was the potential, it's never done until you're not, but there's certainly the potential to create an order of magnitude improvement in patient benefits and drive complete responses, not being picked up by pharma already. They have the pipelines, they have the capability, they have teams of really well-paid professionals. What were the risks that they were concerned about, and how do we start to navigate those? The second, and then you can work backwards from that. You can start to put together a plan. Sometimes in order to figure out what those but-for questions are, you have to go find the right talent. And that was actually something where here in Houston, we do have a fair amount of expertise in cell therapy, and certainly a network that is capable of reaching out even beyond our own borders to find people who can help to answer these questions and create that credible plan to help go get that funding. But really important here, and this is something where CPRIT and programs like CPRIT can really help catalyze a difference, which is you have to find that early champion. And at the end of the day, it's not just somebody who's, you know, cheering you on, but someone who's going to be there with you and put real capital behind you to help you get through the earlier risk points to get enough momentum going to be successful. And then we've really leaned into a partnership model to supplement our weaknesses. Usually if you start a company, you're probably really good at one or two things, and you're probably not nearly as good at a lot of the other components of building a company. And so figuring out where your gaps are, and then understanding how can you find people who are the best at those other things, and work with them to be successful. And that's certainly something worth a lot of consideration. So when we were trying to beat this bare biotech market, you know, we started in the ACT Accelerator. That gave us the latitude and time to build out that really early story. The resources and advisors through that program certainly helped us understand what those key gaps were as we were putting together the initial story. We took on our first seed funding from TMC and Portal Innovations, and that was really critical to giving us that little bit of capital to start to move forward. CTMC, we formed a partnership with them. They're our manufacturer, and you know, they're themselves a CPRIT awardee, and so you can start to see like CPRIT has funded multiple components of this ecosystem right now that even before we'd even gotten hardly out the door, we've already interacted with this program, you know, 2 or 3 times. We formed a partnership. We got investment from Cancer Focus Fund that allowed us to you know, look at MD Anderson as our primary site to launch this trial. And we put that whole story together with that little bit of momentum that we were getting, and how we were putting these pieces together. And we went to CPRIT and went through their process, and it's not easy. It's a rigorous process. I think Kristen was talking about that. You put together a very long application, both on how is this going to work from a scientific perspective, from a clinical perspective, what does your product development look like, all the way through commercialization. And then also, what does that commercialization story look like? Is it a product that can support itself, right? And we're really fortunate to get that award at the end of it. And all that momentum together is what really helped us close this Series A just a couple months ago. And so now we're launching a phase 2 trial, and we're launching it here in Texas. Our flagship sites are going to be Baylor College of Medicine and MD Anderson. But we're not stopping there, because we're looking beyond our borders, and we're trying to make sure we can get to the patients all over. And so that capital that we've put to the company has let us go out and envision a really robust multi-site trial. And one of the things that I would say is just really gratifying for me as part of this story is going out and finding all these clinicians and getting their enthusiasm was one of the easiest parts of this whole process. There's always a lot of hard parts of doing a startup, but talking to clinicians who had actually already heard about the Baylor trial and discussing with them about whether they would like to participate as a site for this trial is really fortunate. So we actually pared down from our initial list, which was a little bit longer even than this. And then this is something else I want to say, because I think sometimes when we think about these initiatives, there's this narrative that gets wrapped up as if it's a charity story, right? Oh, we got to just do, cancer, or we have to do, we have to go after these, neural diseases because, they're bad, and they are bad. But at the end of the day, you still, in order for it to be a viable drug, at the end of the day, it still has to be something that is economically supportable. And T-cell lymphoma is a really supportable market. And so our hope is when we get through all the way to the end and get to an approval, we'll be going in as a first and best in class drug, and we'll be returning money back to the state of Texas, right? And that's the goal here too. And they'll be able to turn around and go fund new companies. I might be one of them, so we'll come back and we'll come talk to them again. But that's the goal here, and that when we get that virtuous cycle going and keep that flywheel moving, that's what's going to let us keep doing this, not for just 10 years or 15 years, but for many, many years to come. And so we're building our pipeline. The March story is sort of just beginning, not ending. There's things that are here on the slide today as we think about where can we go from here and the places that we already have expertise in, and there's things that are not on the slide today that we're already working on upstairs, actually, in the portal space. And so really excited for the opportunity to keep telling the story and come back and keep everybody updated on how we're going to keep building, going after new and difficult indications and targets with great engineering and great biology. But it's not really just about us here today, right? It's not about should we fund cancer or should we fund these neural diseases. How do we build this ecosystem so we can keep going after these really difficult healthcare problems and create drugs that drive impact and build an ecosystem that is vibrant and profitable, so that way we can all continue to make this the best hub in the world for life sciences development. So we're here today because of the CPRIT program, but really the larger point of the story is that smart capital at the right time really can